Hi, my name is Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, and I'm an Associate Professor of Communication Studies, and I wanted to tell you briefly about a little study that I did earlier in the year. First, what I want to explain is that I'm a media psychologist, so my research usually focuses on how people are interpreting different messages that they encounter in the media, how that might affect their perceptions of the world or, their behaviors. I'm specifically interested in how media messages affect people's health, attitudes, and behaviors. And the study I wanted to tell you about today actually involves the role of celebrity health announcements and how people interpret celebrity health announcements compared to the health announcements by ordinary people. There's a theory that talks about how when people see an example, like in a news article, doesn't even have to be in a news article, that example tends to affect their perceptions of how likely a risk is going to affect them. So the example I always like to use is like if you were to just like see the movie Jaws, about the shark, and you were to actually see an example of somebody getting attacked by a shark, and then I were to come to you and say, hey, what do you think your chances of being eaten by a shark are? Chances are, after seeing that example of the shark attack, you would probably overestimate your own likelihood of getting eaten by a shark. It's actually not so common to get eaten by sharks, but sometimes when people see these little examples in the media, they tend to overestimate it. But what I was wondering is if a celebrity were to have some sort of health crisis, say COVID-19, would their example have a greater or lesser impact on people's perception of their own health risk compared to an ordinary person? And so what happened was, I don't know if you remember, but back in March when we were still coming to terms with COVID-19, Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson were over in Australia, and they announced on Instagram that they had already contracted the virus. So that presented an opportunity for me to study the impact that that announcement had on people's perception of their own susceptibility to COVID-19 compared to an ordinary person. And here's how I did this. I did an online experiment. So it was not like an experiment in a lab or anything, but it was an experiment because I had people that were either going to be assigned to read one thing or another thing. Half of the people that participated in my study, they had to read a very, very short, it wasn't even an article, it was basically just like a headline that said, Tom Hanks, who's a 63-year-old actor, announced that he had been diagnosed with COVID-19. Other people, though, if they didn't read the headline about Tom Hanks, they read it about a guy, I just made up the name, Ben Jenkins. And they said, Ben Jenkins, and same exact description, 63-year-old, except instead of course, being an actor, I described him as a businessman. But the whole point is I wanted everything to be the same in terms of how the person who was diagnosed with COVID was described, except for the fact that one of them was clearly a celebrity and one of them was Ben Jenkins, who nobody knows who Ben Jenkins is, right? So then I was able to look at, after just reading this very short description of either a celebrity or non-celebrity, how did that affect people's own perception of their likelihood to get COVID-19? Because on one hand, you could say, right, that maybe because, Tom Hanks is a celebrity, you would think, well, what happens to Tom Hanks isn't what happens to me. Now, if Ben Jenkins gets diagnosed with something, then, okay, we've got problems here because I'm more like Ben Jenkins, right? Or it could be that, whoa, you're telling me even Tom Hanks can get the Rona? Whoa, right? Like maybe it's because he was a celebrity that actually could have increased people's perceptions of risk. So what did I find? I found that essentially people who read the headline about Tom Hanks, they had increased levels of anxiety and personal susceptibility. And that actually made them more likely to engage in preventative behaviors. Like they said that they would be more likely to wash their hands or wear a face mask or different things that were being discussed at that time back in March about how to prevent it. It was a pretty simple experiment, and I'm happy to say that it's been published in a peer-reviewed journal called Science Communication that has a bunch of other articles. It was a special issue all about science communication and COVID-19. And if you're interested in it, hopefully Dr. Martin or somebody can tell you how to get in touch with me, and I would be happy to send it to you. So nice meeting you. Bye.